We're here at Western Illinois University, and I have the pleasure to have a conversation and a dialogue with the Reverend CT Vivian. And our discussion this evening, our dialogue, is going to be about the issue of fear. And so I'd like the Reverend to talk about his experiences, his long experiences in the civil rights movement, and how the role of fear probably played both as a motivator at times, probably as a force that had to be overcome at times. So we're real interested to hear how you dealt with that.
You know what? Let me tell you. The very truth is, it's the wrong question for me. I never had any.
That's what we need to hear.
I really never did. It was never a worry for me. When they, like in St. Augustine, Florida, you see us in this wait-in, and they had all these guys that were on the beach all the time, everything. They made us sort of a human net.
Okay.
And as we moved into the beach, they moved further out. They were going to wait until we were right up to our necks, and then they were going to jump on us because they knew, they all knew how to swim very, very well. Okay. They knew if any of us did at all, it would be rare, right?
Right.
So we kept walking out. In fact, Fred Shulsworth said, let's go this way. And he was met at a slant. I said, Fred, that slant's not going to be of any help in this thing, right? And then all they have to do is move, you know, meaning yes, all they have to do is move anyway, right?
Yeah.
So we got out about waist high, and actually one of their guys jumped too soon because they had their hands together, they had the whole thing, right? And he jumped too soon. Well, they didn't know what to do, so they all jumped, right? And that was a great help because if we'd been out to our neck, that would have been quite different, right?
Okay.
So when they all jumped, right, and they jumped on us. One guy jumped on my back, and everybody was being jumped on one way or the other, right? But this guy jumped on my back, and down I went, and my face was in the sand. He was holding my head. My face was in the sand, and I started laughing to myself. I said, this is it. This is it. You know, you may have gotten through a lot of other stuff, but you won't get through this one, right? Because it's too easy for him to drown me, right? Yeah. Well, just as I was thinking it, right, man, suddenly, phew, I come right up out of the water. There was a policeman that had come and jerked on him. And you know how the weight, up you come, right? And so I came up, and then the policeman told me I was under arrest. Well, I got a little upset about that. And I told him, what? I have not done anything. He's the guy that attacked me, right? Well, the policeman thought about it. He wasn't used to he wasn't used to arresting white guys in any kind of encounter between black and white, right? And so he just took it for granted he was supposed to arrest me, right? And and then it mixed him up because I was really pushing him, right? And suddenly it hit him that and he was sent there by the governor, so he was going to have to explain this to higher powers than me, right? So he stopped. Well, the white guy, he took off, but the guy was nice enough once he realized that, you know, I really was right. And he took me up on the beach and see that I had towels and all that kind of stuff, and took care of me quite well. Now, the issue of fear was involved, but not for me.
Okay.
All right? Now, and we had some guys in the movement that would jump. See, one thing you had to watch was when policemen start beating you, they just keep beating you, right? So one of the things we had to do was to fall on somebody.
To protect them.
Yeah, to protect them. But what it really did was to stop the policemen.
Yes.
Right? And they may hit a couple more times, but they've gotten more control of themselves and realize what they're doing is, is nonsensical, right? Is that, and they don't know what that would end in, given the situation. There was always that protection for us that we were very special, right? And because, for instance, in St. Augustine, for instance, this is the 400th anniversary of the oldest city in the United States.
Right.
Tourist trade is what they wanted. We went down to make certain that we would make an imprint at a proper time. And what we were really trying to do in that case was to wait for Johnson, not the president, but the judge, to have time to get to our case and answer it, right? Okay. Which he later did, and that's why we could walk across the bridge, right? But that's what it was for, is how do you nonviolently fill the space between the decision making that was going on there, and still, as Dr. King said, it's a 10-day world. Right. And let things go for 10 days, and so to speak, in a short length of time, and people forget all about it. My most important moment in jail came in what should have been fear, right? But it was not, is that I had been beaten out front, and we're talking about Jackson, Mississippi now, right? And I say out front, I mean we were not in their downtown jail. We were out to the farm, the prison farm, right? And and one of the guys that came out with us from the city was a guy that was, he came out for a real reason. When we were in the jail in Jackson for some time, it wasn't like a day or two, right? And he, and we were all there, a couple of the fellows were from Mississippi, so they understood it. We didn't understand, we didn't understand what was going on. And so this guy somehow just picked me out, and he couldn't deal with me, right? So, and I just infuriated him by just being, right? So, so after one of these things, and he left, I said, because we were in the behind the bars, and we were talking back and forth. So I said to Bevel, who was one of the guys inside and one of our best organizers, right? One of the best organizers any group had in the movement, really. And so I said, man, he's from Mississippi. So I said, Jim, what is wrong with this guy? And Jim was smiling all the time, right? As I'm talking to him about him, Jim was smiling. He says, his problem is that you look him in the eye. He says, his problem is that, he can't deal with the black man.
We've been talking about fear and fearlessness and how preparation plays into that. And that preparation has to be necessary because sometimes the fear is not in you, but the fear is in the opposition, in the other.
And in fact, that was always one of the problems. What if they, one of the reasons you have to be in control of yourself is because you don't know whether they are or not.
Right.
I remember one of the stories about that was being told to me about this sheriff. He was an older guy, right? And he wasn't for certain how to take all of these black guys that he'd been taught all his life were not, they were violent and they were everything, and he didn't understand nonviolence at all for anybody, right? And then and that he pulled his gun and he had it in this fellow's belly, and but he was shaking. And he was old at that, right? You don't know what's going to cause a person like that to go off, right?
Yes.
So that was always a problem too. But that wasn't a major problem by any means, is that most of those guys so believed in guns and so believed in the fact of your inferiority
Yes.
that they did not mind killing you at all.
Yes.
This was the nonsense of violence.
Yes.
Most people are afraid, violence comes because most people are afraid of situation, don't know what to do, and never got prepared for anything. So they think that the gun, and given this culture, when you start seeing guns solve problems ever since you're a little kid, right? You begin to think that's what solves problems.
Yes.
And they all grew up that way too. And the closer you are to guns, the more you think that, particularly in the case of the South and the issue of race.
Yes.
And when you're in their position, you can shoot people without worrying about anything happening because it's your county and it's your people, and you need not worry, right?
Now, did this fearlessness come from a belief in the righteousness of the act?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. In fact, actually, see, I don't think it was an accident that we were all preachers.
Okay.
Right? When you think about Martin's group,
Yes.
we were all preachers.
Yes.
I mean, we were deeply committed and well trained.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we weren't just guys that somebody said, you're a preacher now and you can go out and preach, right? So that we had given proper time. Now, the other thing I want you to understand is that a goodly number of us were from Nashville. Not only did we come out of seminary, but we'd gone through a year of training before we ever came.
Okay.
And in my own case, right, is that I had been in a nonviolent direct action movement and won it in Peoria, Illinois, 9 years before Montgomery.
Okay.
You see what I'm
Yes,
saying?
yes.
Is that so that it wasn't like we were just stepped off the street and said, I want to do something, right? And we were well trained, and to this day, people from the Nashville movement are still involved in the action.
Let me just kind of give you another framework for that, but I still want to keep that, that topic. Appears to be a lot of fear today.
Yeah,
Immigration,
yeah,
the changing demographics, and the backlash that we're seeing, especially on the internet, the growing incivility.
the blogs.
The blogs, yeah.
And
So
the bloggers.
let's talk about what preparation is necessary for young people today. Is it still nonviolence? Is that still?
Yeah. Still, see, nonviolence always will be the answer. Your point? The participants have to be able to be nonviolent. That is the issue. That's why training is basic. That's why Nashville had so many people that that were leaders in the movement and remain leaders in the movement, right? Even to this day.
Okay.
Because when I say leaders this day are doing things often on their own without an organization, right? But it's one of the reasons that no organization is effective today, because they are not training people to be nonviolent. It's like you have a whatever it is you use to win the whole war, and then you say, but we don't need that anymore. Well, that would be a little foolish, right? Is that, and particularly as we're going toward a more nonviolent world, right, is that it looks like it's more violent, but the controllers of violence are more nonviolent and need more nonviolence, right? See, think about this.
Okay.
Every movement, or almost every movement, for to gain people's rights, whether they were elderly, whether they were young people's movements followed our nonviolent movement.
Yes.
Older people came forth with it. Every movement, women's movements came back on the scene again, right? Because you didn't have to be strong of muscle, you had to be strong of will, huh? You had to be strong of purpose, right? Now, and they could be that, right? So that movement after movement came back on the scene because now they had a method, and it had proved successful. And they had the symbol of Martin was the man, right? He did it. He was organized. People followed. They gained what they wanted. Think in terms even of in Montgomery. No one moved across the nation until we won it in Montgomery, not because we started it, right? They wanted to see whether this nonviolent thing would work. It worked, right? Then everybody started following what we had done. Then the guys in the East and the guys, the further north they were, the fewer things they did beside complain and holler and et cetera, right? And talk about how bad they were, right? But they weren't doing nothing. You see what I mean?
Yes.
They weren't doing it. All the effective stuff was being done in the South. All the bills that were passed and all of that was done in the South by nonviolent direct action, okay? Now, Harlem wasn't changed, but the South was changed, right?
Gotcha.
You
Good connection.
understand?
Oh, yes.
All right, and the people that were there during the complaining weren't coming south or using anything that we were doing. And in fact, Jim Farmer, who himself was really a nonviolent person, should have been a leader before Martin and all of us came along, right? I learned my first nonviolence from him, right? From James Farmer in Chicago. I mean, I was downstate Illinois, right? And he was in Chicago, laid the groundwork. We started following it. That's why I would say I was 9 years ahead of Montgomery, right? But I didn't know what to do with what I had. Okay. So the fact of being there first doesn't mean anything. You see what I mean?
Yes.
Is that Martin had a movement where 30,000 people hit the street, right? That's quite different. Now, but the most important thing, he kept it going. More important than that we had a place like Nashville where I'd been in movement before, but Jim Lawson was the key person, right? Because he had been in India, he'd been doing this stuff since he was a teenager, if not in action in mind, right? So that we had the people, and we had campuses, right? A great number of them, right? And we started training a year before we began to use it. We had the community trained as well as having the students trained, right? Look at the leadership. And we had the ministers trained, all right? That was the key thing in the community. We spent time enough to it that everybody could be, not just get in it, right? You get into the training, right? Now, still the folk are there from it. But we had time to train the community, the whole thing. When they broke out in South Carolina,
yes,
we had already trained our people. We had already negotiated with downtown. We already had our people, the adults organized, right? Adults in community, married and church members and all that, right? Who had gone down and tried out the stores, right? And had been refused, right? So we didn't just go sit down and say, beat me up. Your argument point is that because that's not good nonviolence. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
If things explode, what are you going to do because you're not ready for it, right?
So where can young people get this training now?
Well, right now, there isn't any real place they can get it. You may say, oh, there's a person in so-and-so that's trying to do whatever. But as far as really having an organized place to get nonviolent direct action training, all right, we do not have it. Right now, I have what I call it the Leadership Institute, and my board made it the CT Vivian Leadership Institute. I have to add that story so that it makes sense. But the point being is, we're not doing it either right now. We're trying to deal with what I feel is the great movement of our period right now, right? And it'll probably come to where we need this other. But is that we're trying to create a knowledge base at every level because we think that is the answer to our problems, the lack of knowledge at every level. While we're thinking about the college educated, right, we're forgetting that 60 to 90% didn't even try for that. We must train at every level for several reasons. But one of them is that we no longer can have leadership by accident, all right? And a goodly number of people that might be leaders were never trained to be leaders, right? As a result of that, we don't have anybody now ready for the action. We don't have an organization that is doing anything at the level of the need today, all right? It is interesting to me that Obama doesn't owe us anything. We weren't there to help him until Iowa. And, you know, we're not there,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, good point.
Is that and leadership as we know it didn't decide how he would move and whether we'd be behind him and what was going on. There was no place for him to go to, right? But he did himself, right? Now, but few political geniuses are hanging around, right? Right. So, but what we have to do is start preparing people. Kind of fear I worry about is that we will have a society, black people with great needs and very poor white people with great needs, right? And they have no way to deal with their central problem, all right? And the alternative to all of the problems, all right, is somewhere in nonviolence and knowledge, okay? But not on the college, high school, college kind of understanding,
Right.
right? We are so looking up toward the climbers that we forget all these people are not able to climb,
Yeah, right.
all right? But I tell you this, is that I believe, and I got the beginning of this idea from a member of my staff, all right, is that a people that don't produce scholars, right, cannot be respected by other peoples, all right?
No argument here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and of course, in our, it's no argument, right? The point is, but you can't go to the average person and talk that talk because they don't know what you're talking about because it doesn't even matter, and they can't define scholar anyway. In fact, few of us can, right? But I mean, really define it, right? But the point being is that we know what we're talking about. The word scholar isn't even used. What I'm trying to say, information at that level isn't even sought after. Oh, yeah. And our central problem is that we can't pass ACT test, all right? It's not a matter of whether you graduate from high school, right? The real problem is what high school did you graduate from? You know, man, and who were you and who helped you do what, right? But the ACT test will test you, right? And every college of any importance, that's what they're after anyway, right? They want to see what you really know and how quickly can you come forth the answer, right? And they're looking for it in the hard subjects. Point being is, we don't care about the hard subjects, right? we haven't even heard the word the term critical thinking, right? Is that's not something that's gone into the preparation, since we don't want to get off the subject, right? But, and it's the same way with nonviolence, right? We've heard about a Martin King, but we haven't had any training in what Martin really thought and what he really did, and examine and analyze the various movements, right? And that's necessary, right? It's necessary to really have a deep understanding of nonviolence. It's necessary for commitment to the death, right? And I was given SCLC's trying to start again, right? And I gave one of the speeches, and I talked about commitment to death about 3 times, and you could look at the audience, and they were saying, "Do you really mean that?" Right? You see what I mean?
Yes.
Is that whereas during the '60s,
there was no choice.
That's right, and didn't mind laying it out there, right?
There was no
This
choice.
is what it's going to be. It's going to be, right? Walt Whitman was one of my favorite people, right? Walt Whitman had a line. He said, "Every struggle makes a greater struggle necessary." That's a deep truth, that every struggle makes a greater struggle necessary, because you don't, it's just like tennis, right? You may break the guy before you, but if he breaks back, you haven't gained anything anyway, right? So you have got to double your effort. Instead of going back, you've got to double your effort to make certain that you gain what you won, right? You can't gain it unless you win the next round, right? Every struggle makes a greater struggle necessary. I saw it, so I'm ready for it, right? But I thought this would be a good place for you if you care to. And a part of our greater struggle with nonviolence is the wholesale training of people across the country. In every community that we have, there should be a number of people trained to do nonviolence. Nonviolence is the only alternative to violence in our time. All right? Is that we've led up to it, right? We've got to keep the initiative.
Right.
And it'll take a greater struggle.
Well, you've revitalized my belief in that.
Okay, good
just
enough,
in the
my
short
brother.
term.
All right.
And want to thank you for
Good.
taking some time and sharing these thoughts. And this is going to be part of a series that we're doing on education. And this will be a very important and vital piece. So thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your courage, for your strength, and your vision.
Thank you, my friend.